Welcome to the Liberty Watchdog Network, a highly enlightening show that discusses America's founding principles and how they still apply today. Learn what our government was intended to be, how it has gotten out of control, and what you can do about it. The Constitution is in crisis. If you are a concerned American about the direction of this country, then you are not alone and must tune in every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can't defend what you don't know. Learn it or lose it. Please be sober-minded that what we are about to share will be shocking to you. I am your Son of the American Revolution host and LibertyWatchdog.com founder, Nate Green. So let's explore our nation's founding principles of liberty. Good afternoon, everyone. Today is August 16th, 2017. Today's topic of the day is, what is the definition of law? Last week we shared that early Americans knew that liberty comes from God, not man. And you also learned that he is also the source of virtue and morality. Because what man or the state gives you, if it is not based on God's natural law, they will take it away tomorrow. But sadly, the further society drifts from the truth, the more it will hate those that speak it. So let's move on to our first segment, Real Watchdog News. News that you will not hear from what we call the Mongols of media. Because remember, only 7 major corporations control everything you see, hear, and touch. Soros partners with Firefox and eBay founder to create a censorship tool. GEG reports that Mozilla, the nonprofit that runs Firefox internet browser, is teaming up with George Soros and eBay founder Pierre Omidyar to launch a fact-checking software to stop what they deem to be fake news. They claim that its goal is to disrupt misinformation, but it will not be used to disrupt misinformation coming from the Mongols of media. Its real purpose, folks, is to censor truth coming from alternative media sources, such as what you're listening to today. And if you've been a fan of ours for Facebook or on Facebook for quite some time, you know this is nothing new. Google and YouTube banned a professor who refuses to use gender-neutral pronouns. Professor Jordan B. Peterson of the University of Toronto was locked out of his Google and YouTube accounts when he posted a video calling for an end to the neo-Marxism influence in universities. He wants to stop feeding that cult by cutting it off at the source of student indoctrination. The professor is creating a website with software to perform a linguistic analysis of the course description to identify those that are infected with Marxist ideology. Man, that's a great idea. In fact, this is something that should be done in every school. In fact, he favors a classical education that introduces the great works of civilization and teaches how to think, speak, and write. YouTube said he had violated one of their rules, but when they could not tell him what that rule was, they restored his accounts. Folks, we can be sure that YouTube is now busy at work creating this missing rule. Also, the end of the beginning of free speech on YouTube. YouTube, which is owned by Google, is placing restrictions on videos that comply with its official policies, but which it feels are contrary to political correctness. These restrictions range from denying advertising revenue, preventing sharing, and making them difficult to find searches. The experts will set the limits of political correctness include the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, which publishes a so-called hate list that focuses on conservative, and the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, which collaborated with the Swedish government to block 14,000 Twitter users over so-called hate speech because they opposed the government's immigration policies. Now, this next bit of news is troubling. Trump's Justice and State Departments are blocking new court order to investigate Hillary's Benghazi emails. The Gateway Pundit reported Thursday that a federal judge ordered a new search into Hillary Clinton's Benghazi emails. In an interesting turn of events, Judge Andrew Napolitano reveals the State Department and Department of Justice are blocking, that's right, they're blocking access to those emails. GEG said Attorney General Jeff Sessions and Secretary of State Rex Tillerson have rejected a federal judge's order to search the State Department's email accounts of Huma Abedin, Cheryl Mills, and Jacob Sullivan to disclose emails related to Benghazi. This is another example of the now obvious fact that President Trump has placed moles into high-level government positions who are well-known Clinton loyalists and globalists. It is possible he's keeping campaign promise to the Rockefellers in return for their support that was negotiated during Trump's visit with Henry Kissinger in the early days of his presidential campaign, said GEG. Ladies and gentlemen, what you think you know versus reality are two different things. And if you don't think propaganda or spin happens in America, or that corporations can control what you see, hear, and touch, I challenge you to think again. If you were 5 years old and I gave you chopped liver, and I said it was filet mignon, you would have no reason to doubt me until one day you get to taste the real thing. Let me give you a hint at how false memories or revisionism or propaganda are created. Last week I asked you who said the following quotes. If you say a big enough lie and say it frequently enough, it'll be believed. How fortunate it is for leaders of the world that men do not think. By the skillful and sustained use of propaganda, one can make a people see heaven as hell or an extremely wretched life as paradise. All propaganda has to be popular and has to accommodate itself to the comprehension of the least intelligent, of those whom it seeks to reach. He alone who owns the youth gains the future. It is always more difficult to fight against faith than against knowledge. The victor will never be asked if he told the truth. So who made these statements I just read to you, and who is the author? And are you ready? It was none other than Adolf Hitler, who proved such statements to be true. Do you believe in the Constitution of the United States? Many say yes, but if you can't answer how many delegated powers Congress has, then you have to be honest with yourself and get educated. That is why I challenge you to visit LibertyWatchdog.com today and join our email list for the next Constitutional Bootcamp class. Remember, you can't defend what you don't know, and as our students say, it's not something good to do, it is vital. So let's get back to the topic of the day. What is the definition of law? Have you ever looked it up? Do you know where it came from? Remember last week you learned the source of virtue and morality. Now we're going to tie it together with the definition of law today. You see, the word law is derived literally from something laid down, that which is fixed or set. See, law is also Latin from the root of lay. A law is that which is laid, set, or fixed like a statute, constitution, which also is from the Latin statuo. Now, let's go to dictionary.com. I challenge you to go there, type in law, okay? Because it defines law under the first definition, number one, as the principles and regulations established in a community by some authority and applicable to its people, whether in the form of legislation or of custom and policies recognized and enforced by judicial decision. Now, what's interesting is if you delve into this first part of the definition, we have to ask ourselves, is what are they talking about when it says by some authority? And note that they put applicable to its people. Now, where did they get that from, I wonder? Perhaps the Constitution? But if you read on through these 20-some definitions, and you get to number 18, guess what it says? A commandment or revelation from God. And then read on to number 20, the law of Moses. And then read to 21, the preceptive part of the Bible, especially of the New Testament, in contradistinction to its promises, the law of Christ. Wow. Now let's go to Merriam-Webster's Modern Dictionary. Feel free to go online and type that in. And the first part of their definition is a binding custom or practice of a community, a rule of conduct or action prescribed or formally recognized as binding or enforced by a controlling authority. Again, what are they referring to as the controlling authority? The whole body of such customs, practices, or rules the courts exist to uphold, interpret, and apply the law. Now, if you go to the second part of the definition, it says the revelation of the will of God set forth in the Old Testament. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to join me in my time machine, because we're going to travel back in time to what early America knew the definition of law to be. So let's go back to 1832, when Noah Webster put together his first dictionary. And here's what he defined law as. Number 1, a rule, particularly an established or permanent rule, prescribed by the supreme power of a state to its subjects for regulating their actions, particularly their social actions. Laws are imperative or mandatory, commanding what shall be done, prohibitory, restraining from what is to be forborne, or permissive, declaring what may be done without incurring a penalty. And here's the big part. The laws which enjoin the duties of piety and morality are prescribed by God and found in the Scriptures. Wow. That was the first definition of law. Now let's go back and look at dictionary.com. They don't talk about God in definition until they get to the 18th part of the definition. Merriam-Webster does mention God, but you have to get to the second definition. So even in 1833, the definition of law was given a generic undertone depending on which version of a dictionary you had. Those used for primary schools gave a generic definition. And by the time of 1868, the definition began changing. You see, by the time of 1911, Webster's dictionary only mentions in the first part of the definition the Mosaic Code in reference to divine precepts for the definition of law. But if you don't know what the Mosaic Code is, or that it is referring to God's natural law handed to Moses, then this definition is moot. Since we are in our time machine, let's travel back further to one of the most influential men that inspired our framers, John Locke, who further defines the laws of nature, or God's law, in 1689. He said, "Thus the law of nature stands as an eternal rule to all men, legislators as well as others. The rules that make for other men's actions must, as well as their own and other men's actions, be conformable to the law of nature, in example to the will of God, of which that is a declaration, and the fundamental law of nature being the preservation of mankind. No human sanction can be good or valid against it." He went on to say that human laws are measures in respect of men whose actions they must direct, howbeit such measures they are as have also their higher rules to be measured by, which rules are two. Number 1, the law of God. Number 2, the law of nature. So that human laws must be made according to the general laws of nature and without contradiction to any positive law of Scripture, otherwise they are ill-made. So, ladies and gentlemen, what's the definition of law? It follows suit with what you've heard in the other previous 2 shows. That number 1, where does liberty come from? What is the source of virtue and morality? And now you've just learned what is the source of law. So, ladies and gentlemen, are you reading real history? Are you discerning what is in your hands today versus what was in the hands of our founders of yesterday? Again, are you reading history of those whom lived it? Or are you reading someone's revisionist propaganda or opinion of it? This is why you need to become a Liberty Watchdog member. In closing today, I challenge you to learn the definition of law by going to Webster's Dictionary 1828.com and learn more about the source of our nation by visiting libertywatchdog.com, and be sure to join our email list to take the next constitutional boot camp. Remember, you can't defend what you don't know. Learn it or lose it. I'm Nate Green. See you next Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. May God bless you, and may God bless America.